Story 1. I had worked the night shift at the store for years. It was the kind of job that became second nature. The quiet, the routine, the familiar aisles. I liked the silence of the empty store, the hum of the overhead lights, the way I could lose myself in the task of stocking shelves. It was comforting in a way. But that night, everything changed. My coworker, who was supposed to be with me, never showed up. At first, I didn't think much of it. Maybe they called in sick, or maybe the schedule got mixed up. But as time passed, a strange feeling began to creep in. The store felt different. The dim lights seemed to cast longer shadows than usual, and every little sound made me shiver. The air felt thick, as if something or someone was watching me. As I moved through the aisles, the feeling of being watched grew stronger. I tried to brush it off, telling myself I was just being paranoid. But then I saw him. At the end of the aisle stood a man dressed all in black. His face was half hidden in shadow, but I could see his eyes staring at me unblinking. He didn't move. He just stood there staring. My heart skipped a beat. I blinked, hoping he would go away, but he didn't. He was real. He was there. I felt my hands shaking as I fumbled for the phone. My heart was pounding in my chest, but I tried to stay calm as I dialed 911. I whispered to the operator, telling them where I was, my eyes never leaving the man at the end of the aisle. He still didn't move, but his presence was threatening, like something terrible was about to happen at any moment. The minutes ticked by, each second tense. Finally, the police arrived. It had all happened so quickly. They found the man still standing in the store, strangely calm, as if he had been waiting for them. He didn't resist when they handcuffed him, didn't even say anything. But the way he looked at me as they led him out, it was the kind of look that made my skin crawl. He seemed satisfied, as if he had accomplished something, even though nothing had happened, or maybe it wasn't over yet. After that night, things changed for me. I still worked the night shift, but the store never felt the same again. The once familiar aisles now felt like they were hiding something in the dark. Every noise startled me. Every creak of the building made my heart race. I kept looking over my shoulder, unable to shake the feeling that someone or something was still watching. I used to feel safe in that store, but now I know better. Safety is an illusion, and it can be shattered in the blink of an eye, leaving you with a deep, lingering fear that never goes away. Even when the store is empty, I can't help but feel like I'm never truly alone. Story 2. It was one of those nights when the world felt too quiet, as if it were holding its breath. Most of us want to be at home, where the walls are familiar and the doors are locked. But sometimes, life pulls us out when we least expect it. That's exactly where I found myself alone. Late at night, stopping quickly at the grocery store after a long day. The fluorescent lights buzzing overhead cast harsh, empty shadows across the aisles, and the store was nearly deserted. As I wandered the aisles, looking at my list, I found myself in the snack section. Reaching for a bag of chips, I suddenly felt someone standing too close. Startled, I glanced to the side. A man was there, uncomfortably close, as if he had just appeared out of nowhere. He asked a question. There was something strange about the taste of the chips. It was an odd interaction, but I responded politely and kept walking, hoping it was nothing. But as I continued shopping, an unsettling feeling began to spread through me. Every time I turned a corner, there he was, his eyes following me as I moved. What started as an uncomfortable coincidence quickly turned into something darker. I tried to convince myself that it was just paranoia. but the weight of his presence weighed heavily on my chest. I could feel him, his silent footsteps always right behind me. When I got to the checkout counter, my heart was pounding, even though I tried to stay calm. I paid for my groceries, avoiding his gaze, and hurried out to the parking lot. The cool night air hit me, but it did nothing to calm me. As I loaded my groceries into the car, I glanced around. There was no sign of him. Maybe it was all just my imagination. But as soon as I got into the driver's seat and checked the rearview mirror, I froze. There he was, standing at the end of the parking lot, his silhouette illuminated by the dim street lights. He didn't move, just stood there watching. My hands shook as I started the car and pulled out of the lot, my eyes darting back and forth between the road and the mirror. He didn't follow me, but his presence lingered like a shadow. The drive home seemed endless. Every dark corner, every shadow in the distance seemed to resemble him. As I pulled into my driveway, relief flooded me even as my heart pounded. I parked and got out, but the feeling of being watched had not gone away. Then I saw him again, standing at the end of the street, barely visible but unmistakable. Panic surged through me as I fumbled with my keys, my breathing quickening. Just as my fear reached its peak, the front door opened and my husband stepped out, calling. At that moment, the man hesitated, then disappeared into the darkness. We called the police, but by the time they arrived, the streets were deserted. The man was gone, leaving only a lingering fear. Even though the police assured us he wouldn't return, my sense of security was shattered. Now every night, I can't shake the feeling that he's still out there watching, waiting. Story 3. Jake hadn't planned on working the night shift, but when Wallbounds needed a last-minute replacement, he reluctantly agreed. It seemed like easy money, just a few hours alone in the store while everyone else slept. But as soon as he arrived, the place felt different. What was usually a busy grocery store during the day felt uncomfortably quiet. The hum of the refrigerator filled the air, punctuated only by the occasional creak of the building. Too quiet, the kind of quiet that made your skin crawl. From the moment he walked in, something was off. The store manager, who was supposed to be there with him, seemed nervous, even worried. As soon as Jake walked in, the manager locked the door behind him, muttering something vague about security. But it wasn't just the locking of the door that made Jake uneasy. It was the manager's gaze. They were moving as if he were expecting something or someone at any moment. Jake could feel the tension rising, but he dismissed it as paranoia. As the hours passed, the eerie silence seeped into Jake's bones. He busied himself with small tasks, trying not to think about the strange atmosphere in the store. But then he heard footsteps. Soft, cautious steps coming from the far. They were so quiet that for a moment Jake wondered if he was imagining them. But when the sound didn't stop, his heart began to pound. He moved cautiously down the back aisles, his footsteps barely making a sound on the tiled floor. As he turned the corner, his breath caught in his throat. There, standing in the dim light, was a man. He was dressed in dark clothes, and his face was hidden under a hood. But it wasn't just his appearance that sent a chill down Jake's spine. It was the way the man was looking at him, unblinking with a cold, calculating gaze. Jake's mind raced, trying to process what he was seeing. This man didn't belong here. He shouldn't have been able to get in. But there he was, looking at Jake, almost daring him to act. Fear clawed at Jake's spine, but he forced himself to stay calm. He muttered an excuse and backed away, his legs feeling like they might give out at any moment. He walked to the manager's office, hands shaking as he tried to open the door. It was locked. Panic began to rise in his chest, but he pulled out his phone anyway, dialing the police with shaking fingers. His voice was barely a whisper as he explained the situation, his eyes darting around the store, half expecting the man to appear behind him at any moment. The minutes felt like hours, but eventually, the police arrived. When they searched the store, they found the man armed and ready for something much worse than a late-night visit. His plan was to rob the place, and who knows what else. The police took him away, but the fear didn't go away with him. For Jake, the silence of the store would never be the same again. What had once been a quiet, empty space was now filled with memories of that night, the night he'd faced something truly terrifying.